well, a co-presenter. I can see GOS. I'll give you co-hosting options as well if it is. Yeah, good to see you. Right, let me make you a co-host. We'll give it a minute or two just to get started. So you are now a co-host, Giovanni. So thank you for joining us. Yeah, John, good to have you working from home. I think a few of us are working from home today. It's the first day I've not gone in this week because I looked outside and I thought nothing is worth leaving my front door in this weather in Liverpool. So I've stayed here and it's coming up to 10:01. So I'll get started in a minute. Gary's joining us from, where is it, Gary? Southern France.
Yeah, we're in Béziers in south France. Yeah, it's beautiful, about 25 degrees today. It's beautiful.
On his holiday, and the second time this year you presented with us on your holiday.
It is, unfortunately. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
So I hope you're going to be claiming that time back at some point. But because it's gone 1 minute past and we've started the recording, so I'm going to clear that. We will make a start on this. And this is a session that actually really excites me because it's probably the generative AI area closest to my heart at the minute. And that is custom GPTs and fine-tuning GPTs. And we're joined today by Gary from the ELC and Giovanni, Dr. Giovanni Sala. Do you want to say hello, Giovanni? Just to check your sound's working.
Hello, everybody.
Fantastic to have you. So we're going to divide it into sort of 2 half-an-hour sessions here. Please post your questions in the chat. We'll pick them up as we go along throughout. Gary and I are going to kick off in this first part of the session, so we'll get going now. And what we want to talk to you today about is custom GPT. So we've been learning all week about generative AI, what it can do in different areas, the ethics, sustainability. Today we're talking about custom GPTs. And what they are is custom versions in this context of ChatGPT, whereby we give them the information, the knowledge, the combination of skills, and the instruction of what we want them to do. And the reason that I like these is because we can actually tailor them and target them to be a bit more efficient and a bit more effective at what we're looking to do with our work or our learning or anything in between. And so what that looks like, I'll just get off that link, sorry. The link there is just to the definition. But what that looks like is, let's say you've got a normal GPT, you go along and enter a request. What it will do, it will look through all of its data and come back with what it thinks is the most relevant response to that. With a custom GPT, we're giving it the information to start with. So we're building a foundation of its knowledge, which it will then use as its source. And then it will come to us with a much more targeted response. And there's a range of use cases for these. So the 4 that I've identified here: creative, you can work with them creatively. You can use them to seek out information. For me, I like the way that they are ways to engage with information. So it's a new way of actually interacting with big resources, whereas before you might have to read the whole document. Now you can actually really tailor down what it is you're looking to do and find within that. Learning, we can give it a learning context, so we can make sure that it's aligned to our module and programs if we're teaching with them. So we can give it our educational resources and say, this is your knowledge. Don't interpret things from the web, but actually focus on what I'm giving you and use that as your response prompt and information. And then alignment. And what I mean by that is if you've got a strategy or a framework that you've built and spent years developing, and you want to build further informational resources from that, you can align to that by feeding that as the knowledge and then saying, use this to construct your response from. And what I want to do is give you an example of the sort of 4 areas that I've touched on there, just with one example across each of those. And then Gary's going to talk through how you build these sort of tools, and Giovanni's going to go into even more detail in that area. And at the minute, these are only able to be built on a premium plan on ChatGPT. So CIE do have access to one of these. And if you would like to work with us and build one of these, we're happy to collaborate with you in doing so. And we will work on the evaluation of that with you to see if it's working how you think it's working. We can talk you through that whole process and get you up to speed on how your GPT could work and the context you might deploy it to. So the 4 that I've got here, I'll just talk you through them. We've got the COPA Navigator. So any of you that are familiar with the Code of Practice on Assessment or the Research Code of Practice will know that that is an extensive document and series of documents with many appendices, lots of information in them. So within that, we can explore that document using the GPT by asking questions of it. And there are still mistakes within this technology. It's not where we want it to be just yet, but it's on the way. And each time they upgrade the model, it gets better at what it does. And Giovanni may have technical ways to actually improve that and show us how we can look at the back end and understand it in a more accurate sense as they develop. The curriculum alignment will work with the curriculum framework, so you can align modules to that. The learning outcome development is a really useful tool as well. That will help you design learning outcomes based on good practice that we fed into it. And the ISD, it's the skills study bot. It's a proof of concept bot from Matt Cripps in dentistry. And that's a good learning tool. So I'm going to stop talking about them and actually just sort of demonstrate them to you. Please post questions if they come in the chat. I'm just going to move that slightly down so I can see it. So the first one I referenced, and I'm going to go through these quickly because we don't have very long on this, but actually if you want to explore them yourselves, I'll share the links and all resources with them after. But the PGR code of practice, as I've said, so that's built on all of the documents within the postgraduate code of practice documents. And one that I'm going to ask for this is PhD by prior publication, which is a query that my colleague Ruth asked about the other day. And what you'll see is, I just want to know some information about that. You know, what is the information around getting a PhD based on former publications that I've written? And what you'll see it should do is offer me a direct link, and there we are, it's done it. It's gone back to the exact place within the code of practice on assessment, Appendix 16, and that is here. And I can then click through to that link. So if you type that into normal chat GPT, I don't know why that's not, the web page will load. It's there we are. So I've gone directly into that document itself, and I've just done that through a prompt there. Obviously, I've done that with a prompt that I know is going to work this morning because otherwise it would look silly. But you can test it with anything to do with that code of practice that you want to sort of tease out from it. Another one is the curriculum aligner. So within this, we've got the Liverpool curriculum framework. And what I want to do with this is I've taken my module or my program that I'm developing, and I want to make sure that it aligns to the hallmarks and the attributes of that strategy document. And so here I've got an example program from Maria, Dr. Maria Limonu in psychology. And I always go to Maria because we work quite closely, and she doesn't mind me using her as an example. So thank you again, Maria. And what I'm going to ask it to do is, can you enhance the active learning in this? And within the curriculum framework, we've got a whole section on active learning. So what it will do is it will look to that, it will get examples from that. I've got case studies in it as well, and it will make suggestions based on that. So I am using the Liverpool curriculum framework to build up my module through the ChatGPT that I've then embedded the curriculum framework within. I've also added the strategy 2031 document into this, so it will align to that as well. We've got a question in the chat I can see. Can we get access to these custom GPTs on personal accounts? Yes. And that is the reason why we are starting to promote them more widely. Before, when we first started building these in November 23, I believe it was, when they just launched, they weren't accessible. But actually what we did was we sort of got a head start by building, as you can see on the left here, and testing as many as we could, knowing that they would eventually come to the front of being able to access them. So you can access any of these through a free account. All you need on each of them is the link. So I'll put the link in the chat if you want to have a little try at that. You know, here's one now. If you've got an account logged in, have a go on that. You get a limited use case by free accounts. So you can, I think you can engage with it something like 10 or 12 times, you know, in quite detail, but only 10 or 12 times before it sort of times out and it says, come back to me later. That's actually fine for a lot of the sort of queries that you might run through something like this. If you're going to use it more extensively, we would recommend getting in touch with CIE, and we'll collaborate with you in doing so using one of our accounts, or we will look at how we can get you access, you know, longer term. But yeah, the reason that they're free is brilliant because it means we can now create them using a premium account with us and then share them with anyone that might want to use them in general. They can also be made private, so they're not, you know, the links aren't for sharing, and they're only used within a team account. So we operate on a CIE team account here, which means, as you'll see at the bottom here, workspace chats don't train any models. You also won't be training any models by using these because you can turn your data sharing off, and they don't sort of take the data from them and develop themselves any further, do they, Gary? They just exist once they've been built, as Gary will sort of talk you through. A nod, a mic off and a nod. That's all I needed. Perfect. So the third example here, again, the learning development, you know, learning outcome development. Let's say I've got a module that I've been writing or developing. I want to just improve or add some learning outcomes to it. I'm going to go again to the psychology outline. So this document here is just a module overview. Let's say I want to add in an online element. So I would like to add in a learning outcome for an online element. And what it will do, and my colleague Sam has built this, so this works really well if you're in part of the program design process and you're coming together, you know, you're thinking, how can we bring in some good learning outcomes for this program or this module? And what it will do is look at what you've got so far. You can feed anything into it. You can feed in images. So if you've taken a picture of perhaps some working on a whiteboard or anything like that, it will look at everything you've done and start to come out with some good learning outcomes. And we've had really nice feedback on this so far from teams that have used it as part of the program design process. Very happy to share all of these and everything we're working on, if you want to have a little test in your own time. And the area that really excites me as well in terms of the 4 areas that I showed you, which was information, creativity, alignment, is possibly the future of these technologies, which is the idea of the personal tutor. And this comes into mind of thinking, okay, if I can add my module content and anything that I've got permission to use, and I can ask students to engage with it, or I can design learning resources from it, will that have a benefit in the longer term with students being able to access it at any time in terms of multimodal, so they can talk to it if they want to talk to it? And in this case, we've got an example from dentistry where, let's say I come along and I want to quiz myself. So I've loaded it with all the study skills content from the first year module on that program. It's clinical skills based. I want to do a quick quiz. So I just say, okay, give me a quick quiz. And what it's doing is giving me a quiz based on the content from my course. So it's not looking at programs at, different universities. It's coming from Liverpool. It's looking at the Liverpool program and the handbook and everything to do with that. And it's picking me out an area. And it can, it's giving me an option here, but I could very easily come to it and ask for this. So I could say I want a quiz on dental charting systems, for example. And what it should do here is start to give me a quiz. We're confident that the information that it is delivering is accurate because the source information has been fed into it and we've tried to refine it in many ways. We're still not 100% confident. We're still testing these and we're thinking actually it's the future models that will be completely reliable. So we haven't rolled this out yet. It's just a sort of proof of concept, but it's something that we want to evaluate with students and see. We'd start first, actually. We're going to roll out with some colleagues and say, have a little play, see how you think it works, see if it does what you want it to do. So I've got a very quick MCQ there. I'm also going to ask it, can we role play? So in this instance, it's going to give me a role play scenario where it looks at everything it's been fed and adopts the role of a patient. And then I then act as a clinical practitioner and work through a situation like that. So that's a very, very quick flash overview of the sort of areas that you can do with these. Again, it's sort of trial by testing with them. We've seen really good engagement with colleagues that are using them. They found them really useful where if you're writing an accreditation document, for example, and you can feed in all of your information and help it to align to that document, it's just saving that time and that effort of writing everything out where we've got all the information, but we're bringing it together and we're doing it in a way that, saves us time, but also it's a useful tool in doing so. And that's an excellent question, Ewan, about how much technical knowledge you need to be able to create your own GPTs, because I will now hand over to Gary, who I think you'll all be quite impressed will show you how easy this sort of development is. So Gary, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Okay. So we're here in the paid version of ChatGPT. We also have a sort of departmental license that we share. And this is the normal interface for ChatGPT. We can see on the left-hand side here we have Explore GPTs, and this will take you to like the store, as it were, for GPTs, where you can search and look at all of the ones other people have uploaded and produced. But we also on the paid version have this white button in the top right of the screen that is create a GPT for yourself. Okay, so if we click on that, it will open the interface. And we can see it's a very, very clear interface. On the left-hand side of the screen over here is where we build and configure the GPT. And on the right-hand side of the screen, we have like a preview of how it will work. So you can actually gradually improve it on the left-hand side and test it on the right-hand side. Now, I saw a few people in the chat, I think Ewan and maybe someone else, were asking how easy it is to build these things. And it's really no more difficult than using ChatGPT generally, because you just use natural language to gradually build and improve whatever it is you're trying to do. We only have 2 tabs So we have the create, where you talk to it and you tell it what to do. You can actually attach files over here. And then you have a configure tab as well, where if you choose to name it here, you can do that. If not, it will talk to you on the other side and it will ask you to name it. You can give a short description, which will be like the tagline under the GPT, so people can identify what it's for very easily. And then you can enter instructions for it on this side as well. Okay. If we go down the page a little bit, there's a space to upload files to it. So if there's anything you want it to know, not really instructions, but any knowledge you think it should have, you can upload a variety of documents here, from Excel to Word to PDF to CSV, plain text, many things. It doesn't process audio or video, but you can upload most anything else. We have a few checkboxes down here. We can allow it to browse the web, go out and find things. We can allow it to create images. Ask the user might want to create an image, and you can turn that on and off. And then we have code interpreter and data analysis. So in this case, if you wanted it to write code, or if you wanted it to be able to read documents, you would need to turn that on. That's off by default, but we can turn that on. I normally turn that on, and I normally turn web browsing off. Actions is when it goes out and talks to external websites or services, and we won't be looking at that today. It's a little more complex. So what I'm looking to create today is something that we used in the summer at the English Language Centre. We have an assessment on our pre-sessional English course where students have to prove they have the ability to effectively participate in a seminar discussion and live seminar discussion. And we found that the functional language they were using was very limited, and it was prejudicing their success on this assessment. They were using the same phrases over and over again, a very sort of limited range of phrases. So we thought we'd try and, or I thought I'd try and build something for my students that could help them broaden the range of phrases that they use. So I'm going to sort of try and recreate that now and build that and explain all of the instructions and the philosophy behind the choices I made in each of the instructions. Okay, so I'm going to just jump over. I have a Word document with these instructions. I'm just going to go over and copy and paste into it so I don't have to type live. And I'm going to give it the first instruction. So the first instruction is just going to be like the idea, what I want it to do. So sort of one of the keys to creating one of these GPTs is just to have an idea. It doesn't have to be the perfect idea at the start, but the most important thing is to get it started. You can always gradually improve these things as you go along. So we're going to try and create this GPT to assist students with their functional language in the seminar discussions. I've given it a name and some basic ideas here. So I'm just going to send that. That's the first thing. So it will have a look at the initial instruction, and it will update itself. Okay, so we'll see how it responds. It will generally accept the name, and normally the first thing it will do is offer to create a profile picture, because each one of these things has a little profile picture in your list of GPTs at the side. It makes it a little easier to pick the one that you want. Okay, it's given me a picture. I'm going to say it's fine, so we don't have to generate any more. So then I'm going to go back to my document. I'm going to take my next instruction, and the next instruction I've given it is trying to help it define its own role. So the role it's going to perform and the tasks that I kind of expect it to do. It will always give you these kind of follow-up questions. You don't have to accept them. You don't have to answer each of them. You can just sort of go over that and just plow on with your what you want from it. So I'm going to paste the next thing in, and I'm going to tell it what it is, what role it has, and its general task. So I've given it a role. I've asked it to help the students and use interactive exercises where they're going to practice these specific things. Okay, so I'm going to hit that, and then it will again update itself. It will assimilate what I've given it, and it's starting to work in the right direction. It's come up with a good question now. It's going to ask me, like, what tone should it take with the user? Before I paste that information into it, I'll just sort of highlight again we now have a nascent version of the GPT on the right-hand side, and you can actually use this live at any point. So you can test it, see if you think it's going in the right direction, see if you like the quality, tone, content of the responses. And then you can always just move back to the left-hand side and give it a little more information to get it closer to what you want. Okay, I'm just going to jump back to my document very quickly and find some information on the tone. So I have some text. I'm going to paste the text in. So I've asked it to be supportive, to be informative, and to be focused on helping the students get more confident. And I've asked it to give constructive feedback, making sure the students feel encouraged to participate actively. Okay, so that answers its question there. And once again, it will now start to update itself. And it will assimilate this new instruction that I've given it. Okay, now what the next thing I'm going to give it is kind of how I want it to interact with the user, what format of activity or task do I want it to go through with the students to help them get better at the task that we are aiming to help them with. So now I'm going to give it this instruction, which kind of gives it a map of the interactions that I want it to proceed with the student. So this is a four-stage process. And again, it will then update itself. It will remember this information, and now it has detailed steps guiding the students through these tasks. Okay, there's a few other things we can do. We've defined the behavior now. We've given it a role. We've also given it the tone and how we want it to speak to the students. We will also define what it should not do. So I have a little text prepared for this, and I'm going to paste it in. So in this case, we're asking it not to provide any sort of academic content, because that's not the goal of this whatsoever. It's purely to help them with their functional language. We also had a problem in the ELC last year with students preparing like scripts and learning scripts for our seminar discussion assessment. So we're going to be quite clear with it that it should refuse to do that. And it should politely admonish the students if they ask for something like this as well. These negative instructions, they need testing. We found it's very, very good at doing what it's told, but it's not so good at not doing what it's told not to do. So sometimes these will work, sometimes you have to refine them, test it on the right-hand side. And if it's still, if you're acting as a student and it's still doing these things that we've told it not to do, maybe try and clarify or phrase it differently and see if you can persuade it not to do these things. So I'll hit send on that one, and it will again update itself. Okay, let me just jump back to my document. Okay, I'm going to ask it to do one more thing, which is like give some extra value to the user after a certain amount of interaction. So it can go beyond the initial task by adding like extra layers of support or functionality. So in this case, we're going to ask it that after several interactions with the student, it will provide a kind of overview and assessment of the student's strengths and any areas for improvement that they have. And it will make some suggestions to them. So if the student continues to work with it and continues to perform these activities, they will get some kind of payoff and they will get some sort of actionable points that they can use. I'm just going to get rid of that last line. I don't think we need that. And I'll send that. Okay. Now, one other thing that I felt we should include in this is a little help for it, a bit of context on the types of phrases that it could use in some of the interactions. So I'm going to go back to the Configure tab on the left, move down the page, and go to the Upload Files box. So let me just go to my Downloads folder. And I have a Word document here with a list of these phrases that could be appropriate for it to present to the student. Okay, I've tested this set of phrases earlier in the week, and they were presented in a table, and I found it actually confused some of the categories of phrases that I gave it. And I spoke to it about this. I had a chat with ChatGPT about this, and it explained how it can struggle occasionally with tables, and would it like it refined into a list format, which it would be much more accurate with. So we have actually encountered this problem before when we were trying to talk to it about rubrics, and the rubrics were presented as tables. Converting tables into like a list of text or a sort of linear document is much more effective and useful. Okay, so I could test it here, but I think I've given it quite a lot of good information. So I can move to the right-hand side of the screen and go to the Create button. And then you see who you can share it with. Okay, so we have our sort of team account here. Access can be invite only. It can be public, so anyone with the link, which I'll do today, so I can put the link in the chat later. And I will hit that. If you wanted it to go out to anybody at all, and it would be searchable in the GPT source, so anyone with a ChatGPT account in the world could search for it. You could do that. But I'm going to stick to anyone with a link, and they can chat with it. Okay, I'm going to hit update. And there we have the GPT has been created, it's been trained, we have a document attached to it, and it's ready to go. So at that point, you can just copy the link, or you can view the GPT, and you'll see how it would work for the end user. It's made some potential prompts that students could start with. And you can actually edit these. If you go into the Configure tab, there is a space where you can actually write your own initial prompts that everyone will see who uses it. And it can be a nice starting point for some people. We can see, as I specified, it's got the attached file because I enabled the data analysis and code interpreter option. And it's ready to go. Well, I'll stop sharing them. Okay, any initial questions? I can see a lot in the chat. Let me have a look.
The questions are flying in, Gary, as we anticipate in these sort of sessions, because it's really interesting, really engaging. You've just shown the process there of actually how anyone that's not techie can do this just by talking through it, which I think is a very nice thing. One of the questions that I think I'll pick up, publicly before we hand over to Giovanni is the idea of the other platforms that can do this. So yesterday we had a session from IT Services and Duncan that are building a dedicated university chatbot, which is excellent for data control, security, student information, that sort of thing. I strongly recommend watching that back for information on administration. There's also a comment around Dante. Now, Dante is a platform that does exactly this, but it's more customizable from what we've seen. Kaplan, a colleague in Kaplan, Stephen, has also looked at that, as well as using the Azure system. And Giovanni, I don't know if you're going to touch on this sort of area, because Giovanni is very much more technical than Gary and I, or at least I, and possibly can explain some of this in better technical terms. But they also ring fence quite nicely in a way that actually you can't ask certain questions that might tease out source information as you can with some GPTs. So as with all of this, we're aware of what we're putting into it, what we're building around it. And I don't know if there's any questions you want to pick up, Gary. We've got 1 minute before I want to hand over. Tunde, I'll take that last question about usage. Yes, you can see how many conversations have been had. You can't see the conversations that are going on. So if Gary's built something here and we all use it, Gary has no way of seeing what we're asking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which is a positive in some ways because the data's secure to you, the user, but a negative if perhaps you wanted to see that it was being used for its purpose and then evaluating whether it was doing it well. So two sides to all coins. If you want to get in touch about testing a custom GPT, contact cie@liverpool.ac.uk and I will pick it up, or one of my colleagues will pick it up, and we will happily come out with you We've got an intern that's joining us from XJTLU that's going to work with us to evaluate these and how they can positively impact learning, teaching. So happy to bring them on board as well, and we'll introduce you. But I think, Gary, you've got to get off your mid-morning croissant and coffee, haven't you?
I certainly have, yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Thank
you so much for joining us for
Cheers.
that half an hour.
Bye, bye, bye.
Any questions, keep them coming to me in the chat or by email. But just to so we give Giovanni the attention he deserves, I'll pick them up later. So yeah, Giovanni, pleasure to have you on the meeting, and I'll hand over to you now.
The pleasure is mine. Pleasure is mine. So I've got to share my screen, I suppose. Am I allowed?
You have full permission. That's it. We can see it now.
It seems so. Yeah. Just let me render the presentation. So can everybody see my screen? I suppose.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, splendid. So first of all, let's set a bit the tone regarding my presentation, especially linking to what has already been discussed. So well, basically GPTs in the last few months have been improved quite a lot. So both Gary and Rob showed quite amazing things. And when I started developing my Retrieval Augmented Generative app, the GPTs were not so good, to be honest. And so while trying using GPTs, custom-made GPTs, I was a bit, well, not very satisfied, especially when it came to doing for example, scientific tasks like understanding and summarizing papers, scientific papers, and so on and so forth. Many mistakes and so on and so forth. Nowadays, it's much better. And this is actually quite important because it lowers the tech requirements in order to enjoy the advantages of generative AI, which is good news. My presentation about retrieval augmented generation must be intended as something useful when you've got to fine-tune these kind of models and scale these kind of models and these kind of apps. And I'll show you a few examples in a few minutes. So anyway, the summary of my presentation, I'm going to briefly talk about prompt engineering and retrieval augmented generation. Some key advantages about RAGs-based apps, especially increased accuracy, updatable knowledge, and scalability. Well, I'm just going to show a few hypothetical scenarios along the way, just to convey the ideas. And then, dulcis in fundo, I'm going to show you my app, the app that the demo, basically, that I created for a module in psychology. So prompt engineering is nothing but what Gary was showing us a few minutes ago. So basically using natural language in order to tailor the behavior of a large language model, of a GPT. For example, an average psychology student, as I imagine that they may, for example, ask to any GPT, like ChatGPT, talk me about statistics, and I assume I have no knowledge of that. That sets the tone, that tells something that is going to influence the way the GPT provides answers. And this is actually very important because, of course, if we need a specific, we've got to tailor the behavior of the GPT, we've got to provide as much information as possible in order to do that. So this is, in a sense, nothing new, nothing more than what Gary has already shown us. Now, prompt engineering can be associated with the retrieval augmented generation, which is something similar to, again, what Gary showed us. It's basically providing ad hoc, so developer, user-developed, so to speak, a knowledge base that can be used and also prioritized by the large language model in order to provide a certain behavior that we like. Now, what's the main difference compared to the GPTs? Is that we can simply fine-tune what the GPTs at the moment cannot do. For example, we can limit the number of words in the outputs by manipulating the so-called tokens, which is a specific parameter in a function in the app, so in the code. We can optimize chunk size for performance in order also to avoid hallucinations. We can force the app not to be creative by simply modifying a specific parameter, which is called temperature. And now I'm going to show you a bit the code in order to provide a few simple examples. So this is the code. It is much easier than you might think. But my point here simply is to show you a few things. So, for example, this little piece of code here contains very important information, for just like the temperature, which is a very low temperature here. In ChatGPT, the temperature is 0.7. That allows you to make allows the GPT to provide more creative responses. If I lower this a lot, the creativity of the responses drops, which reduces the probability of hallucinations. So this is quite useful. Also, here's the tokens, so which basically sets how many characters or words, depending on the Python packages you're using, but basically reduces the number of words of answers. This is actually quite important, for example, in teaching scenarios, because many of my colleagues are quite afraid of students asking these type of GPTs to produce essays in a click, in a mouse click. We can avoid this by simply changing this number here. Another important part of the code, of course, is the prompt, which is nothing but the prompt engineering part that also Gary was showing us a few minutes ago. It's just made within a chunk of code. Okay, now going back to the presentation for a second, and please let me know if you have any specific. Please, Rob, if some specific questions just comes up, you can direct me to the questions within my while I'm presenting. It's no big deal at all. I cannot see the questions at the moment, so please let me know.
Okay, no problem, Giovanni.
Thank you. So anyway, possible teaching scenarios, as I was mentioning before, is that if I've got to run a statistics course and a student asks about time series, if I ask a ChatGPT, the students may receive excessively extensive and confusing information because time series is a huge field. If I provide a specific database, this is not going to happen because I can force the app by prompt engineering and by modifying specific parameters within the code to stick to the information that I want the students to receive. I could come up with other scenarios in research. For example, it could be very easy to write reviews, but I mean, if you have any questions about that, you can ask me. I'll speed up a bit now also to allow for some questions later. Anyway, another important aspects, and I think an element that should be considered when it comes to this kind of apps that require more technical knowledge in order to be developed, but that can provide some advantage. So one of these advantages, one of these advantages is the fact that knowledge is very easily updatable. Now, I'm not showing you the specifics of the codes because they are a bit complicated, but in an essence, when I build a database for these apps, I simply have a folder and in the folder there are PDFs, audios, could be images and these kind of things. And by simply running a script, I can build a database. So once the architecture of the script is done, this can be done over and over again in order to build new databases and or update existing databases with, again, a click of a mouse. We get just to drag and drop stuff within the folder of our that our apps use in order to create and update databases. So it's very easy, it's very fast, you know, provided provided that the code is already done, and so the architecture of the app is already functioning. That really makes things very, 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 very easy. So again, I'll just avoid skip the scenarios because both Gary and Rob have already talked about this extensively. Anyway, I think the most important advantages of RAG apps, and more generally about using codes, of using programming in order to create these apps, is scalability. So is that the fact that I can, as I was mentioning just a few minutes ago, that I can create and update databases in a mouse click. But it's not only that. It's also updating prompts in the prompt engineering situation. When it comes to prompt engineering, assume, for example, that we have many courses, many modules in which this kind of apps may be very useful for the students. And of course, but the modules are quite different from each other, so they need both a new database and a new set of instructions, so a new set of prompt engineering instructions. So this can be done quite easily as well, because again, the database can be once you have your PDFs, your audios, your pictures, whatever. Again, with a click of a mouse, you can create a new database for the new module. Likewise, you can do the same with the prompt engineering part. So this part here, just to be very clear, you've got just to provide a new set of instruction. And once you test your app, if something doesn't go as expected, you can just simply modify the set of instructions along with the specific parameters, as I was showing before, just like temperature or the numbers of tokens, in order to force a specific behavior straight away. So again, I won't be delving too much in examples because, again, we've been talking about this a lot, and and I would like to show how the app functions with a few examples from my course, the course that I do in my master. But I would say that now probably is the good time for a few questions. Do you think, Rob, maybe we should answer a couple of questions?
Perfect timing. Thanks for that, Giovanni. So one question that's popped up is where the databases sit. So you've touched on this, but do they have to be stored locally, or can we get them online?
Well, it's both, or either one. It's the same. You can do either way. And now I'm using everything locally at the moment, simply because, as you know, nothing has been decided yet. So I don't know whether these type of apps are going to be used or not. So I'm just producing demos.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very it's very flexible.
And Judith raised a really important point here about GDPR within these custom GPTs, and whether personal data, GDPR data is secure within them. I mean,
Well, yeah, this is something we've been talking about. I mean, you and I, Rob. And this is quite important, absolutely. At the moment, the app is using publicly available papers, data, and these kind of things. A possibility is to use local language models, just like Oyama, and rather than using ChatGPT or OpenAI, basically. At the moment, I'm using OpenAI for these apps because because the performance is good, it's much easier.
Yeah.
But and this is one of the key advantages as well of using Python-based apps, basically. You can create a local large language models in order to treat in order not to share the data with OpenAI, just to be blunt. But it's a delicate question because in any case, even with Oyama, you've got to send the data to servers around the world. Because of course the large language model has been trained on the internet, basically, so on a huge database that cannot be easily stored on a computer database or
we're thinking, aren't we, that in the future, when we can scale these down to be able to scale the use of them up, actually that environmental cost will also come down. I know Meg's touched on that in the chat. So these presumably have a far less, the local models, and when we say local, we mean stored on a machine, within our campus. They have a far smaller carbon footprint than perhaps the bigger ones. Is that right?
Well, I'm not an expert on that, to be honest, so I've got to trust you on this. Now, but if I understand correctly, you are talking about creating a large language model, I mean, stored completely on servers within the university. This is going to be a costly solution, but I think, I mean, if the university is willing to take this on, it's possible, of course. Absolutely.
Yeah, probably not in the current financial climate if we took that one to request purchase form. But there's a question from Regina about, I mean, when I first met you, Giovanni, what I was sort of blown away by your technical knowledge. Gary and I have looked at this from a very non-technical side. That's why we appreciated the OpenAI version, because we could develop without having that expertise. But obviously you are an expert in this area. And Regina asks, how long has it taken you to develop these skills, and engage at this level?
Well, I mean, full disclosure here. I mean, these techniques, methods, and so on and so forth, well, they have been around for I don't know, 1 year and a half mostly. So I guess then nobody is really an expert because it's been too little time. But I think it's easy. To be honest, I think it's easier than it looks because. Well, before generative AI, I was programming already, especially for data related data related tasks. So I had already a background in programming that helped.
Yeah.
But around in the internet, there are repositories with templates about many things. So what I have created is pretty 101, to be honest. It's pretty basic. So I think it's accessible to anyone who wants to spend a few months studying how it works, to be honest.
Great. And yeah.
But that being said, I mean, in order to use the app, you don't need the technical knowledge. Once the app is, I mean, and this is actually quite important. I mean, in my opinion, to highlight, because you know, educators just like yourselves and so on, or people involved in education, can make a decisive contribution when it comes to prompt engineering and testing the apps.
Yeah.
Because the instructions, I mean, I can give the instructions myself, but I'm not an expert in your module, my colleagues' modules, and so on and so forth. And likewise, I'm not an expert in, you know, the ethics, if we've got to create a ChatGPT with the ethics and so on and so forth. The point is that once the architecture of the app is done, it's just a matter of changing a few parameters and copy and pasting instructions.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Meg asked what the name of the app is, and is there this is an app that you're actually building yourself, isn't it?
Yes.
Have you got a name for it?
I called it meta-analysis copilot, if I remember correctly. Just let me check. It's yes, Psych 641. Yeah, because this is my the module, the master's module I teach in. So it's again, it's very simple. It's just a demo basically. It's just a few. The database is relatively little, but the idea is again is that it's easy to scale up.
Yeah, and I'm aware of time. We've got a hand up, so I'll come to you in a second, Tony. If people want to get in touch with you, Giovanni, are you happy to take email questions, or do you want me to get them and then come to you with them? What do you prefer?
I'm happy to, of course, I'm happy to reply to any questions, to network with people, to help out people if possible.
Yeah. And we'd love to, we'll get you back, definitely. I mentioned earlier in the chat, Stephen Livesey from Kaplan's been developing a chatbot. We've heard from Duncan, we've seen Gary and myself and yourself. Colleagues are doing this across the university in different areas. And what we want to do is come together, sort of share that practice and learn and look at which apps work well in which context. But yeah, we've got sort of 6 minutes left. So Tony, your hand's been up. Please fire away.
Yeah. Hi, thanks. Thanks for your talk, Giovanni. Very exciting. So many ideas from it, and I was thinking about applying to research as well. So it's definitely a know-how question. So obviously this could be used internally by the university in terms of research, kind of to match applicants for research proposals, basically to identify a number of opportunities internally, externally, with the European Union, etc. Precisely because you got that ability of using internal database and using okay, so what is the direction that is going? I mean, is it worth for me to start like working on to building an app when actually this is something that some of the scientific platforms might have started using in the future? Is it possible that Web of Science or any other scientific publication is going to actually answer directly to, it's going to start using AI with applications that will allow me to use those databases as consultants, which is what I'm really thinking about here, including, you know, how easy it is for University of Liverpool to develop an app now that in which you can ask, is anybody I could be collaborating, who would be the best match in these types of collaboration, and give you basically a consultancy, a guidance towards research. So what's the movement about it? I mean, what's your recommendations and what you have found?
Well, now, you've opened up a few points that you've raised a few points that are quite interesting. I mean, when it comes to connecting to the Web of Science, for example, I mean, it's of course possible. The problem is the restrictions of these databases. So this is something that maybe the university could resolve with making a deal by making a deal with the Web of Science or whatever, because in that case you can simply connect to that database, download everything, or just create a vector database by accessing all the PDFs or all the information of that database, and you're already very close to create to creating an app that is leveraging on all that knowledge. The same, a similar aspect, I suppose, applies to, if I understand correctly your point, to the internal information, for example, the grant related, the grant opportunities and stuff. Of course, if we could have a database with everything that we need to know about grant proposals and so on and so forth, the researchers could simply query the app and saying, I'm an expert in, I don't know, cognitive decline, just like I things that I do, that one of my topics. I would like to do a grant, to apply for a grant related to cognitive decline and big databases and so on and so forth. Can you please identify the best matches for this? And I may simply get a ranking of possibilities. But I could also move this forward. Given a specific call, we could also build an app that says, this is the call I'm going to target. This call has a specific format, so it requires me this document, this other document, that talk about, narrative curriculum and these kind of things. If the app is trained correctly, I could simply, again, ask the app, come up with a draft that is tailored for that specific format of that specific grant. That would save so much time, especially for people involved in research, such as myself. But of course, it's not trivial. It's not trivial. I hope I have replied to your questions satisfactorily.
Thank you, Giovanni. Thank you, Tony, for that question as well. We're just drawing up to time. We've got one more question. Is your code available on GitHub, Giovanni?
No, not yet. I haven't, also because I'm not sure about the copyright and these kind of things, because this is something I made, during my tenure here at the University of Liverpool. I'm not familiar of the right related implications, the copyright related implications of that. So but what I can say is that many similar templates can be found online. I mean, if you just Google RAG templates, and you can find, I found these kind of templates in GitHub.
That's perfect, thank you. And that brings us lovely to the end of time. Huge thank you to Gary, who's gone, but Giovanni as well. Thank you for your time today.
So what is important here is not that the answer is particularly insightful or fancy or whatever. But the point is that it's tailored for someone who doesn't know anything about meta-analysis. And it's exactly about what I wrote in my materials, so that I can control the complexity of the answer. I can set the tone and so on and so forth. And also I can correct usual mistakes that you can find on the internet about meta-analysis. For example, if I ask about heterogeneity, explain what heterogeneity is. So heterogeneity in a nutshell is simply the degree of consistency of results within a specific literature. So you have many studies that you all put together in your meta-analysis, which is simply a synthesis of many studies regarding a specific scientific topic, and you then calculate how consistent the results are within a specific literature. And heterogeneity is simply a parameter that tells you that. Now, this is the way the app replies is quite satisfactorily, at least to me, because it provides a very easy explanation of a complex topic, just like heterogeneity, a complex concept. And it explains, for example, it refers to the variability of difference in study outcomes across different research studies. It is crucial because it helps researchers understand the extent to which the results of individual studies differ from one another, and whether this difference can be attributed to factors beyond random sampling error. Now, this last bit is actually extremely important, and this is the bit that ChatGPT doesn't get very often, because it basically tells you that heterogeneity is composed by two things, which is random error. So you get different results simply because, you know, your sampling, the samples of the people taking part in the studies are different. The way you measure outcomes is not perfect, so you add error and so on and so forth. And so you find slightly different results just for that, just because there is sampling error. But also, the heterogeneity is composed by variance, so variability in the results that depends on the factors, or specific factors, as like age of the participants, the type of measurements, the type of interventions, whatever. Generally, this is the bit that ChatGPT doesn't get very often because it just talks about variability in a very generic way without discriminating between the two aspects. So real variance and artifactual noise, the artifactual variance or simply noise. Now, I don't want to get too technical, but the point here is that, you know, if we can control the answers of the app, we can ensure the quality of our teaching, the quality of the information that is conveyed to students. So again, if anybody has any other question, I'm happy to answer.
Brian has just got one. She's had a stats tutor this morning ask her, can she get access to this? Or, you know, how does this sit at the minute within the university?
Well, at the moment, this runs only on my computer. Again, I haven't deployed it yet because I don't even know whether I need the permission of my line manager to do so. So just to be on the safe side, I haven't done anything. Okay. If someone needs some stats advice, though, I can share some material that doesn't have to be the app, of course.
Okay, Brian, he's gone from a sad face in the chat to now a happy face in the chat. So that has made her very happy. But Brian, perhaps if you'd like to give Giovanni an email, it would be good
just drop me an email.
Get you two talking anyway. But yeah, that's great. Thank you for that.
So any other questions?
No more questions in the chat. No. Oh, we've got a point from Judith. Sorry. Just going to read it quickly. Can you get the chat, Giovanni? Because it's quite a long question. We need to ensure that we are teaching students transparently about the difference between our focus database and our general inquiry to ChatGPT.
So I'm open the chat,
Yeah.
but we need to ensure that we are teaching students transparently about the difference between our focus database and general. I worry slightly that they don't need to then make your evaluation of the answers and that they can run on these focused answers. So, well, I mean, if I understand correctly, this is a point, you know, it's a point similar to what I was mentioning before, meaning people are afraid that with these apps, they can make a very good, but they can pass exams easily and with no effort whatsoever, without even studying or whatever. Now, we can of course share with the students the fact that these apps get their information from a specific database, and this database doesn't well, isn't exhaustive, so it's just a limited amount of information that is prioritized within the app. Now, consider that statistics is quite a dry field, so there is not much room for interpretation or creativity or reflection, well, independent reflection and this kind of things, because it's mostly about understanding quantitative concepts and how to apply them to real case scenarios, to real data, and so on and so forth. I mean, we can of course be transparent. That's no problem. But my main concern is that when it comes to this kind of statistical apps, is that people get the correct answer, and an answer that I can understand easily, that can be conveyed in an easy way. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I think it does. And I think actually it also it's a good question, Judith, or a good point. And it calls into question the use of the tools overall, doesn't it? And the critical reflection of the information that comes out. You know, if we want students to just get the answer straight off, or do we want them to consider everything that underpins that learning as well?
But I would add, this is actually an important point beyond generative AI, but it you know, makes me think about, for example, X or any social media or news and so on and so forth. I mean, anytime we acquire information, especially nowadays, the risk of being exposed to partial information is very high. So this kind of critical thinking that we need in order to avoid being you know, well, to avoid relying on only specific sources, only a bunch of sources. Well, again, it's something that goes beyond generative AI, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think it comes, you know, it was the Wikipedia concern, wasn't it? That if the information is just there, the Google concern, it's just another technology down the line that will change slightly how we engage. But a really important point made. And Tony's just added how important it is to translate to students that there is academics behind these tools, you know, building them. There's a brain behind it, you know, it's the expertise that is fed into it as well. So they're not just sort of standalone AI built from nothing.
No, of course, because both the GPTs and the RAG apps, well, they are made of expertise. So the database that we create and the type of prompts So the prompt engineering part, this is academic or teacher made. So, and also that's why it's very important to take people on board, not only the ones who are involved in creating these apps or the GPTs, but the people, the teachers, the researchers, and so on. So the ones with the domain specific knowledge in order to develop the app.
Yeah, really good point. And thank you for that question, Tony. We're coming up to 1:15. We've got that second bit on recording for everyone that might have missed it, that has left the meeting. That's absolutely fine. Giovanni, we're definitely going to get you back, if that's okay, for a CIE event where we can talk about this more. We'll invite Duncan and Stephen and anyone else that wants to be a part of that conversation, because as you say, this is at the forefront of the use of these technologies, and we've scaffolded this week. So we started from the beginners intro on Monday. We're up to here on Thursday, where we're talking about the future use cases and brilliant apps like your own. At lunchtime, so in 45 minutes, we've got a session on policy. So then the overarching, how do we use these? How are they used at university? How are they regulated? That might interest some people still here. I'm going to get away for that now. So I'll let you go, Giovanni, but just to say thank you again for staying on longer, and to everyone that joined us for the extra.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
We'll put your contact information up on the Padlet with the recording. And yeah, we'll be great to talk to you soon. But thank you very much, and see you all shortly for another session or later this week. Thanks again, Giovanni.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.